I sat Nathan down and I asked him what he wanted to do with his life. "Oh, I really want to be a rapper," he responded. Well, since he certainly had a wealth of life material to draw from, I thought it was a good idea for him to write about his experiences, which might strike a chord with other kids who'd been in similar situations. I also thought it would be very cathartic. So he commandeered my desktop computer and started writing, while his friend in Las Vegas, Charlie, coached him over the phone. They compared notes on other rappers and their styles, their music, but it was all very raw and quite crude. I really didn't like it. It also seemed to me that Charlie had the better personality for it, although I didn't tell Nathan that. I did notice that Nathan was reluctant to dig deep into his life, which was understandable, since he'd never been able to talk about his childhood abuse. When he returned to live with his mother after 5 years of separation, I mentioned to her that I thought it would be useful for Nathan to see a psychotherapist, but she said she didn't want him to have to relive those traumatic experiences. She had a point, of course, but I know that Nathan had a lot of unresolved anger towards her for abandoning him when he was 8 years old and leaving him with his drug-addicted father. So, in my opinion, they needed therapy sessions together. But it didn't happen. And neither did Nathan's attempt at writing lyrics for his budding career as a rapper. I reminded him of his childhood dream to be a fireman, and he got very excited. "Oh, yeah, that's what I really want, but Maria have to be 18, I think." Since there was a volunteer fire brigade not far from Newtown in Sandy Hook, where Nathan's friend Tony lived, I suggested we go along and speak to them and see if he could apply. We had to go shopping for clothes that were more appropriate, though, especially trousers that weren't 4 sizes too big and hanging halfway down his rear end. So off to Walmart we went. A guy in his mid-50s, let's call him John, was very welcoming as we entered the firehouse the next day and seemed quite encouraging at the prospect of Nathan applying. He gave him a form to fill out and said he'd also need 2 references. I would obviously give him a reference, and Nathan said he'd ask Charlie, who was 23, to give him one as well. The application form was completed and we dropped it off at the firehouse a few days later. I then got a call from John shortly afterwards, asking a few general questions about Nathan, since I was one of his referees. I said how this was one of Nathan's dreams, that he was passionate and a hard worker, I hoped. But my back went up when he asked if Nathan was involved with drugs and if he was in a gang. Now, this really offended me, and quite frankly, I thought it was racist. You see, the demographic of the area of Connecticut where we lived tended to be primarily Caucasian. Since Nathan was a dark-skinned Latino, I suppose he stuck out. "Would you be asking me that question if Nathan was white?" I responded. "No, he stuttered. "You know, Nathan's had a tough life, and you'd really be making a difference by giving him this opportunity. But, you know, if you have any hesitation at all, it's better that we don't proceed." John could tell that I wasn't pleased by what I thought was a preconceived opinion about Nathan. No, I didn't mean anything by it. In fact, why doesn't Nathan come along to the station on Sunday morning at 11 a.m.? We're doing a Jaws of Life demonstration. When I told John that I'd be sure to drop Nathan off, he said, "Oh, don't worry, I can pick him up, bring him back." And that he did. When Nathan returned 2 hours later, he was full of excitement as he told me all about his experience. But Maria had a bit of a dilemma. "Oh, really?" "Yeah." Then he pulled out a bottle of beer from his pocket. the men were all drinking beer and they offered me one. I didn't know what to do because I thought it was probably a test. So I took one, but I didn't open it. I put it in my pocket and told them I'd drink it later. He explained that he didn't want to refuse it in case they were offended by that. He wanted to be one of the guys. I thought it was so hypocritical, considering the question John had asked about Nathan's involvement with drugs. Anyway, he called me the next day and said Nathan did really well. He's a nice kid, he said, but he's going to have to get his GED before he can qualify. Would also be good if he could get some wheels. I knew the lack of transport was an impediment, and we'd already looked into getting Nathan a bike. In fact, we found one the next day at a charity shop. And although it wasn't exactly top of the line, it was a bike and it worked. We joked about painting it red and how funny it would be to see him racing on his bike and ringing his bell on the way to a fire. The next step was to enroll Nathan in night classes to study for his GED, which was easy enough to do, except that it was 12 miles away in Danbury, and because we'd had a lot of snow and ice, it was too dangerous for him to go on the bike. So I drove him there and back, naturally. Barry and Tom Fontana were ready to start production on their new TV series for Warner Brothers called The Bedford Diaries, which was set in a fictional New York City college called Bedford University. It centered on 6 students with different backgrounds, experiences, and ages who are brought together in a sexuality seminar taught by a somewhat maverick professor played by Matthew Modine. In this seminar, he challenges and inspires his students as they question their assumptions about their own sexuality, their life, and identity. They record their very personal thoughts in a weekly video diary assignment. I didn't have anything to do with these scripts, but without my prompting, Barry suggested to Tom that I play the role of secretary to the dean. Talk about typecasting. I think I've been there before. Anyway, I had a nice scene with the actor Milo Ventimiglia, who went on to star in the very successful and fabulous series This Is Us. He was a sweet guy. I really liked him. In another episode, I worked with Peter Garrity, a great character actor who played the dean. The other stars were the amazingly talented Audra McDonald and Penn Badgley, known for Gossip Girl. So, a great cast. But, just like the jury, it was a case of another one bites the dust. Maybe it was too racy for the audience, but whatever the reason, it was cancelled after the first season. Barry, of course, had fingers in a lot of pies, one of which was directing Man of the Year with Robin Williams. Apart from working on the script with Barry, I wasn't invited to be involved in this film, which was really disappointing since it was being shot in Toronto, where I used to live, and because I'm a Canadian citizen. Oh well, you win a few, you lose a few. Nathan was doing okay at night school, in some subjects anyway, astronomy actually being his favourite, and he was complimented by the teacher for his knowledge of the stars and the planets, which really boosted his ego. However, it seems that his head was way too much in the clouds because he just couldn't get to terms with math and English, which of course were essential. So he ultimately dropped out, which also meant that he wouldn't be pursuing a career as a fireman. He then dropped a bomb by telling me that his girlfriend in Vegas, who he spoke to several times a week, was 4 months pregnant with his child. He was excited about it and told me that he would go back when she had the baby, a boy, and then he hoped that they'd be able to come back to Connecticut to live with me. One big happy family. Well, I couldn't see that happening. Since I now didn't have a job, and neither did Nathan, it was time to scour the local newspaper. An upscale nursery/garden centre not far away was advertising for help. So we went along, and Nathan was hired right away. One down, one to go. I found a job helping a 60-year-old woman, Jennifer, who was moving to a new house and needed help packing. She'd been thrown from her horse and carriage when the horse was spooked, resulting in a back injury which restricted her mobility, and she was in so much pain. Anyway, now with spring on its way, as well as a new baby, many changes were about to take place, but unfortunately not all good, as you'll hear in my next episode. Thank you for listening.